and tried to cut off virtually all federal funding. This country under Trump is moving rapidly toward authoritarianism.
Un senador estadounidense, Bernie Sanders, lanzó un discurso devastador en el que no solo desenmascaró los abusos de poder de Donald Trump, sino que también defendió con valentía a los mexicanos de los ataques e intereses de Elon Musk y la élite multimillonaria. ¿Qué dijo exactamente este político que hizo temblar a los hombres más poderosos de Estados Unidos? Comenta la palabra senador, si crees que este senador le dio cátedra a Trump y defendió a los mexicanos de Elon Musk.
Thanks very much for joining me. We are living in a dangerous and unprecedented moment in American history. And I'm getting a lot of calls from people who are not only upset about what's happening, but are wondering how we best go forward. Well, let me tell you, we've got to be smart, we've got to be organized, and we've got to fight back. This is not a time for wallowing in despair and hiding under the covers. The stakes are just too high. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for our kids, for future generations. We're fighting for the future of this planet. In the first 2 weeks of his presidency, Donald Trump defied the Constitution by ending birthright citizenship, fired government watchdogs, allowed drilling along our coastlines, pardoned violent insurrectionists, suspended all foreign aid, and tried to cut off virtually all federal funding. So, how do we go forward? First, to be effective, we've got to understand what, in fact, is happening around us right now. Second, we need a short-term strategy. What do we do tomorrow and the next day and the day after that? Third, we need a long-term strategy. How do we build a movement that gains political power? Here is, in my view, a brief overview as to what is happening under Trump.
Cargando.
Most importantly, the move toward oligarchy in our country. Government run by the rich and the powerful is proceeding rapidly. And it's not being done secretly. A little over a week ago, Donald Trump was inaugurated for his second term. Standing right behind him were the three richest men in the world, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg. Men who have become over $200 billion richer since Trump was elected and who now are worth almost $1 trillion more money than the bottom half of American society, 170 million people. But it's not just American society, 170 million people. But it's not just oligarchy that we should worry about. This country under Trump is moving rapidly toward authoritarianism. Just a few examples. In violation of the Constitution and federal law, Trump attempted the other day to suspend all federal grants and loans. That means he blocked funding for Medicaid, Head Start, food stamps, homeless veterans, etc., etc. Tens of millions of Americans, some of the most vulnerable people in our country, were impacted by that decision. Fortunately, Americans all across the country stood up in outrage and said no, no. And with the help of the courts, much, but not all of that freeze in funding was rescinded. You may have noticed that Trump is intimidating the media with lawsuits against ABC, CBS, Meta, and the Des Moines Register. If Trump does not like what media reports, he is threatening them with lawsuits, undermining the First Amendment. That is a direct movement toward authoritarianism. Now, that's a very broad overview of where we are today. In terms of short-term strategy, we've got to mobilize as strongly as we can against Trump's dangerous proposals. And let me just say this importantly. Yes, the Republicans control the House and the Senate, but do not forget their majorities are small. In the House, a body of 435 members, they have a 4-vote majority. That is a razor-thin margin, and their legislation can be defeated. There are a number of Republicans out there who won in Democratic districts by small margin. So let me tell you, these guys do respond to phone calls and emails. So if there's a piece of legislation you disagree with, get on the phone and call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-2131. And what is some of that legislation that we should be concerned about? Republicans right now are working on what's called a budget reconciliation bill. The most important element which would be a massive tax break for the wealthy, to be paid for by large cuts in Medicaid and other programs that working families and low-income people desperately need. At a time of unprecedented income and wealth inequality, when so many of our people are struggling to put food on the table, we must not savage programs for working families to provide huge tax breaks for billionaires. We must vigorously oppose Trump's efforts at mass deportation. Yes, we must strengthen our borders. Yes, we should deport people who have been convicted of serious crimes. But no, we cannot destroy families who have lived and worked in this country peacefully for decades. Not only is Trump's mass deportation program immoral, it will have a severely negative impact on our economy. As all of you know, we are seeing extreme weather disturbances and devastation in our country and all over the world related to climate change. Think about LA, think about North Carolina. We must vigorously oppose this absurd drill, baby, drill doctrine, which will only make an incredibly dangerous climate situation even worse. And those are just a few of the issues that are coming down the pike. But we cannot just play defense. We have got to be on the offense. Please never forget that the agenda that we are fighting for is widely supported by working families all across this country, and we must continue to fight for that agenda. The American people do not want cuts to Medicaid and the privatization of Medicare. They understand that health care is a human right, not a privilege. We must continue the struggle for Medicare for all so that every American has the health care that he or she needs. That's not a radical idea. That's what Americans want. Federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. We must raise that minimum wage to a living wage, at least $17 an hour. If you work 40 hours a week in America, you should not be at least $17 an hour. If you work 40 hours a week in America, you should not be living in poverty. All over this country, we have a major housing crisis, and it's not just 800,000 who are homeless. It is millions of working families who are spending 40, 50, 60% of their limited incomes on housing. Instead of spending almost $1 trillion a year on a wasteful and bloated Pentagon budget, we have got to build millions of units of low-income and affordable housing. And when we do that, we put large numbers of people to work at good-paying union jobs. I could go on, but let me conclude by saying this. The United States is the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. If we stand together and oppose right-wing efforts to divide us up by our race, by our religion, our sexual orientation, or where we were born, if we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Bottom line, let us go forward and fight for a government and an economy that works for all, not just a few. We simply do not have the luxury of moaning and groaning. We have got to stand up and fight back. We can do it. Let's go forward together. Thank you very much.